So in this third video, what I'm going to be talking you through is how we will then take the drum beat and the bass line and add chords to it. Now I know this is a completely different approach than we did with pop music. And the reason for that is pop music is built around chord progressions and simple 4 chords. Whereas EDM music focuses more around what sounds good, what works well, rather than the music theory behind it. So we've got the drum parts, we've got the bass parts. Just have a listen so we remember what it sounds like. So that's what we've got so far. So what we're going to do is add some chords to that. So we're going to go to add new track. Because we're doing electronic music, I'm going to select the synthesizer. But you can select any chord instrument. So strings sometimes work, piano, keyboards, they work too. Guitars work, bass doesn't because it's not a chord instrument. Stay away from the brass and woodwinds, they're not chord instruments. So I'm going to go synthesizer. Now if I play, that's the sound that we've got. So I'm going to change that. So just click on leads. And once again, you can press the play button to have a sample as to what it sounds like. I'm just going to select synths down here. You can have a listen to as many as you want. I'm going to try this one. Okay, so the very first thing you need to do is see what notes you used in your bass line, because whatever note you used must be in your chord. So I'm going to go back to the bass line. I'm just going to double click on this colored track here on the very first one. Now I need to figure out the note. So the keyboard lined up here lines up with these particular lines in this grid. So the white lines, or the lighter color, they're your white keys, and the darker color are your black keys. Now I can see that this directly lines up with this key here. How do I know what key that is? Well, C's marked there for you, and as we get higher, we know it's just alphabetical order. So what letter comes after C? It's D. So whatever chord I choose has to have a D in it. Now if I just have a look at what my other couple of notes were in my second bar, so I can just follow that line back. That was an E, because C, D, E, and then the next one up was an F. C, D, E, F. So I got D, E, and F. Now I'm not going to find a chord that has all three of those in it, because as you know, chords always skip a note. But I'm pretty sure I can find one that has a D and an F in it. So to be able to do this, you need to remember that basic theory that we went through on how to build chords. So if D's the first note here, let's just start a chord on a D. I'm going to go back to instrument to make this a little bit clearer to see. Alright, now to get a major or minor chord, remember we need to count up a certain amount of keys from that one. So if I want a major chord, I'm going to start on D, and I'm going to count up 4 keys. 1, 2, 3, 4. So there's my second note, and from that second note, I'm going to count 3 keys. 1, 2, 3. So if I play all 3 of those notes, that's a D major chord. Now it's a little bit low at the moment, so where it says octave, I'm just going to go up. That's a little bit high. Sounds nicer. Now, if I remember correctly from my second bar, it was not an F sharp, it was an F. So I know that that's probably going to clash a little bit, because F's right here. So it'd be like playing that, which does not sound good. So I'm not going to use D major. What about D minor? Let's check that one. So we start on D. We count 3 keys because we're going minor. 1, 2, 3. That's an F. So this one might actually work. To find our next note, we count 4 keys. D, F, A. So I'm going to make sure I go back to the beginning. I'm going to press play and I'm going to play that chord just to see if it works. Yeah, it's not too bad. So back to the beginning we go. Make sure you're comfortable with where those 3 keys are. We're going to press record and press and hold. For the whole 2 bars. Oh, but you can see exactly what I did there is I just played it on the bass instead of on the synthesizer. So I'm going to go back. Okay, you've checked your bass notes. The next thing you need to do is click on the synthesizer so you go onto the correct instrument. Missed that step. Alright, but the notes will be the same. Now it might be a little bit high, so I'm just going to go down the octave. There we go. Okay, back to the beginning. Now I've got the correct instrument. When I press record, I'm going to press those 3 notes and hold them until this purple line gets to number 3. Alright, you can tell I held on a little bit long there, but you'll be able to fix that in a minute. Okay, so what you need to do is find out what your notes are in your first 2. Really focus on that first one and then build a chord from it. Only use the second bar just to inform you. Like I did with mine. I knew there was an F in my second bar and I knew D major had an F sharp. So I didn't want to use that one. But D minor has an F natural with just a normal F, which meant that it's probably going to work a little bit better. So use those sorts of things to think about what you might need. Now, if you copied my notes exactly last time, then you'll be going along something similar. So make sure you pause the recording, go and record your first chord, and then come back. Okay, now the next thing we need to do is actually edit this chord because we don't know if we played all the notes correctly in time or not. So we go to piano roll. Now I can see that these just held on a little bit too long. So I'm just going to click and highlight all 3 again. Hover over the end until you get this bar with the 2 arrows. Click and hold and just drag back to that middle line. Now these actually all started at the beginning, which is surprising for me. If they didn't, you just want to go right click, quantize, and then you can go 1. You can go 1/4 if you were really close. Anything in between is fine. Alright, so now we've got a full chord. So now what we need to do is the same thing, but for the second half. So we need to go back to our bass part and figure out what the notes are. So I've got a C here, and then I know that this one is a B because B comes before C, and my next one is actually a B flat. Ooh, I used some interesting notes in there. So C, B, and B flat. Now, once again, I know I'm not going to find a chord that has all those 3 because they're all right next to each other and chords always skip a note. So I'm going to focus around that C. So I'm going to go back to the correct instrument this time. I'm going to move this over to the 3 because that's where we want our new chord to start. Go back to the instrument. And now I need to build a chord that's got a C in it. So again, the easiest way to do this is just to build a chord from C. So find C. Now I can go major or minor. Remember, it's 4 steps major, 3 steps minor. So C, 1, 2, 3. That would be minor. 4 would be major. And then from there, 3 keys. So the C and G are always going to be the same. If it's minor, if it's major, but it's always C and G. So I'm going to play around with both and see which one I like. So I'm going to start with major. I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'm going to play the first bit and then play this next chord. Not too bad. What if I go again back to the beginning, and this time I'm going to try the minor. So always experiment and see what you think sounds good before you start recording anything. Minor this time. I actually think I preferred the major. So I'm going to make sure the purple line's on the 3 because that's where I want to start recording. I'm going to press record. Now, it's going to give me 8 counts in, but because I'm already down partway through, I'm going to be able to hear the 8 counts before it, which is going to work really well for us. Ooh, I accidentally recorded in the wrong spot. Okay, anytime you do that, just press the undo button. Let's try that again. Looks like it's going to go from the beginning. Not recording the first chord, and now. And I just realized that I was not playing a C major chord. So I'm going to go back and do that again, but feel free to pause and go off and record your own chord. Okay, now I've got that second chord incorrectly. So again, you go to piano roll. You can see that it doesn't line up with where it's supposed to. So I'm going to highlight it all. I'm going to right click. I'm going to quantize. I'm going to just go to 1. And it's going to snap it directly into place where I need it. Now it's a little bit shorter than what I need. So again, highlight, drag to the end. Let's have a listen. And then, of course, I've got the loop on, so it's going to keep looping. But those 2 chords work quite well with that bass line because they use the same notes. Now, that's where we can stop with that, but you can also start to experiment a little bit more with what notes we're using. So I've got DFA here, but what if I added maybe another D at the top, maybe another A down the bottom, and then for the second one, so I've got C, E, G, add another G down here, if I add another C up here. So what this is going to do is it's the same chord because it's the same 3 notes, but it's just going to thicken it up a little bit. So that already sounds quite different. And now if you wanted to experiment even more with it, you could change the rhythm. So instead of just playing and holding the chords, we might want to make them a bit shorter. Okay, now I'm going to copy and paste those to here. Oh, that was a little bit late. Okay, it's a little bit shorter. So you can see all I'm doing right now is playing around with the lengths of them. So instead of just 1, now I've got this rhythm going on here. Now if I just wanted to hear that without the drums and bass, I could just go solo track these headphones and I'd just be able to hear this one. So So you see I've just added in a couple of breaks there. If you go back to instrument, you've got all these different settings here as well. So you can play around with them to change what it sounds like. Now the moment of truth, I have to unmute it and see if it works with everything else. Not too bad. So start to experiment a little bit with kind of how you're going to play your chords, and then if you're using a synthesizer, you can go back and play around with all these different things. Just make sure it's playing as you're moving them so you can hear what difference it makes. Okay, but that is how we do the chords. So just start with 2 basic chords, one for the first 2 bars, one for the next 2 bars. And if you're feeling really creative, you can do 1 chord for each bar, but make sure you just do 1 for every 2 to start with, and then start to experiment from there. Always complete the guidelines and the base steps before you try and make it more complex.